Welcome to another edition of Unscripted and Unstoppable, the podcast for women over 50 who are embracing life's transitions with courage, curiosity, and confidence. I'm your host, Lorraine Quick. And if you've ever found yourself standing at a crossroads, whether it's navigating an empty nest, starting over after loss, or simply stepping into a bold new chapter, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to be talking about something that every single woman over 50 has faced at some point in her life: finding courage in tough times. Life has a way of throwing us those unexpected curveballs, challenges that demand from us our best. And while we can't always control what happens, we can, I believe, choose how we respond. Joining me for this conversation is confidence coach Janice Debo. Janice is deeply passionate about helping women develop their inner strength, face uncertainty with confidence, and take courageous steps towards living the life they truly want. We're not just talking about being fearless, we're talking about real, practical ways to cultivate courage even when fear is present. In this episode, we'll explore what it really means to be courageous, especially in middle life and beyond. We'll talk about how to build confidence when stepping into the unknown. And we'll also share practical strategies for making bold moves, even when you feel stuck. And we'll cover much, much more, I'm sure. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, relax, and let's dive in. Janice, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today. I want to start by asking you this. What exactly inspired you to focus your expertise on courage?
It kind of fell in my lap, Laureen, about 4 years ago. I had started writing blogs,
Mhm.
just basically telling stories on a little nothing site. And I'm sitting in my recliner. I don't know what I was doing besides just sitting there at the time. And the very words courage, confidence, connections just dropped in my lap. And I went, that's interesting. And I like it.
Mhm.
And what it did was help me to start really looking at my life and seeing where those three things have impacted me.
And so it was out of your own interest for yourself that evolved to then want to share that with others.
Exactly. I wound up looking at different perspectives of my life, and I was still in the middle of needing a lot of courage at that time because I had recently gone through a divorce
Mhm.
and moved once, but was in a position of needing to do that again because the rental place was being sold.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I know my my head goes, not again, not again.
Uh,
And yeah, so I wound up stepping into courage. Sometimes it comes just because we have to be courageous. Sometimes it's because we want to be. Sometimes we just don't.
or it's a little bit of both. It's like I said earlier, there are things that happen to us in our lives that we have no control over. The only thing we have control around is how we respond.
Exactly.
And yeah, wow, it's having to move twice in a very short period of time would be exhausting to me. I can't even imagine what that took. And it's not just moving. It's not just the logistics of the details of moving, finding a place and moving everything. It's transformational, that kind of change for your life.
It it really is. Going through a divorce obviously puts you in a position of looking at everything in
Yeah.
your life. The whole scenario was very challenging, very. I can't emphasize that enough. But what I will tell you was that second move wound up being three more moves, or was it four? I wound up moving five times in less than 2 years.
Okay, well, there's definitely a pattern there. Yeah.
Well, there was a market issue, and it wasn't mine.
Oh,
It
no,
wasn't
of
my
course
preference.
not.
I had no choice. However, as I went through these tough times, I started looking at what am I doing here? Why is this happening?
Mhm.
And I'm not typically hyper analytical, but I tend to overthink the whole scenario. And to tell our audience, when you're in the middle of a crisis, that's probably not the best time to overanalyze because it will drive you nuts.
Yep. Yeah,
Totally.
they always say when you're walking through hell, don't stop. Keep going, right? Don't stop and ponder. Just keep moving through. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing what, and I tend to believe that we are given opportunities. That when I said that it's a pattern, it's like we're given opportunities because there's something we're supposed to be learning, right? So
Mhm.
things happen over again and again, just different scenarios, different people, but the same experience keeps happening to me. And it's like it's because I believe I have things to learn from that. And you sound like you are a very introspective woman. You do think a lot about what's going on around you and what's happening to you. And you ask yourself that question, how can I grow?
Yes. Now, I did grow more since I've gone through that than I did
Mhm.
in the process. In the process was just so much to deal with.
Yeah.
However, I learned some very strong lessons that I can say letting go became the norm. Letting go. And I moved a lot as a preacher's kid growing up. My dad was transferred frequently. It
Mhm.
wasn't military, but it felt like it, I think. And in all of that, I just don't, nobody really is thrilled about a move, I guess. But yeah, you're shaking your head, me. No, no, no. Don't want to move again. However, I had to let go of that. I don't want to. I don't want to. I can't keep this up.
Yep.
And I had people just coming out of the woodwork at every turn to help me. It
Oh,
wasn't me. And when we open our hearts and say, I don't know why this is happening. I may or may not know, but I do need to move through. And then you usually will see the lesson shortly thereafter if you sit and listen.
exactly. Exactly. So when you think about all that and the act of being courageous, if someone were to ask you, maybe not exactly in that moment, but I'm asking now today, how do you how do you define what courage actually is in the experiences that you've had? How has courage showed up for you in those moments?
It was looking back, and now I'm writing my life story. I'm looking at it differently.
Hmm.
Courage doesn't show up the same for anybody. If anybody tried to replicate it from me, then they'd be stepping into my world, and that's not their story. For
Right.
me, courage really means embracing yourself, sitting down and being yourself, standing up, and whatever that entails, being yourself. And one of the most courageous things that anybody can do is ask themselves the question, who am I? Not what do I do? Who am I?
Hmm.
That that is one of the most courageous things anyone can even consider. I found courage in all of this and being able to start letting my guard down, stop being so defensive, and let people help me through the whole situation. I was definitely empowered by other people. And that took a lot of courage because I am extremely, extremely independent. I can do it myself. I can, I don't. And then one of the biggest courageous acts I had too was not being embarrassed about my situation, not being embarrassed that I'd gone through all of this, that I was going through all of this. So shame had just started was was a problem. Being ashamed of the situation that I took it on. It's my problem. Nobody needs to deal with this but me. But yet I'm in the middle of it, and I had people, like I said, stepping up. Letting the shame go took a lot of courage, Lorraine. It did. It letting that, okay, I didn't make this happen in 100% of it anyway. I was partly responsible, of course, but letting shame go, that is a big step. Embracing yourself and just saying, I can't be ashamed of this and who I am and where I'm at.
So I heard several things in there, but so what I got was first and foremost, it's like courage comes, or the demand for courage comes when we are standing in front of the unknown that
Oh,
has potential risks for us or dangers.
yes.
We know who we are though, and we stand there knowing that and we face it
Hmm.
and we let other people support and help us. And we also let go of all of the shame, all of the blame, all of the, this is happening because I'm a bad person, the judgment, right? All of that, just let it go and not mess with it, but instead focus right in that moment on what needs to be done next.
Oh, big time, especially during moves. And I I wound up letting go of so much, not just emotionally, but physically. There were things I was lugging around, carrying around, holding on to that I thought really meant something to
Hmm.
me. However, through all of this process, it was nothing short of a major purging that was going on over the period of time.
Yep.
Yeah, just purging. And when we purge emotionally, we're able to let go physically of many things. The loss of a pet, a family member, that type of thing came into play
Hmm.
in through a lot of this scenario. And in that process, I started to learn the value of life, living a life. And what does it really mean? Changing my standards. I recall, I've got to tell a funny story. When I was actually going to a coach prior to this really ramping up.
Hmm.
She was helping me through some stuff, and I knew the divorce was imminent. It was prior to the final thing, of course. But when I sat down with her, I was in tears. I was losing it. I said, I can't, this is my house. This is my house. And I can't let go of this. There's a backstory to that, but I was so upset. Well, she had been a realtor and she said, it's a house. Janice, it's just a house. I'm like, no, it's a home. She said, beg to differ. It was not a home. It
Hmm.
was it was a just a house. I think at that point, my whole perspective transitioned into, oh, okay, this is just a piece of real estate. It's, I had to let go. I was encumbering myself with something that was not meant to be in my life any longer, and for my good, for my own good. But when she said that, I think she poked the bear, and the courage went, okay, how do I do this? I just got to let go of it.
You know,
And I,
that to me, that's a really a crucial piece to what we're talking about today, because what she had you do was she had you reframe the situation, right? She had you look at the situation very differently than how you had been seeing it, so that you could let go of what you had no choice. You had to let go. It wasn't like there was an option here, right? You couldn't stay.
mm-mm.
So that reframing of moving it from this is a home to this is a house, this is a piece of real estate, in your own words, made it easier for you to accept what was going on and to cope and deal with it. It seems to me.
I think it did in the long run.
Uh-huh.
Immediately, it was painful. It was painful because you expect something to be you expect things to be a certain way, and a lot of what we do is we have this image of what we think should be.
Exactly.
And I was not only losing the marriage, which overall wound up being to my benefit, but the place I lived, everything. It was it was traumatic, and I won't make light of it. I'm sure some of your listeners are going through stuff, dealing with stuff, or have. But reframing is a process of, maybe I call it flipping it upside down.
Yeah.
What is, yeah, just flip it. Just flip it. And I had another coach that I was working with me at one point say, just what is the worst case scenario? And I said, I don't go there because it was too easy to go to the worst case scenario. I tell people go to the best case scenario because you want to picture what you want, not what you don't want.
I think that's great advice because if we picture what we don't want, we get lost in the fear.
And
When
frequently get what we don't want.
Well, this is true as well. I've been struggling lately with some medical issues, and my doctor is like, I want you to take these measurements, and I want you to report them back to me. And it was like it was getting to the point where, you know what? I just decided I'm not going to focus on what's wrong with my body. I'm going to focus on what's right with my body. And that's when, for me, healing begins, is when I am focusing on the vision of what I want versus what I don't want. Right. And that flipping it's a really hard thing to do because the fear can grip you and convince you that you must stay in this fearful state. Otherwise, something terrible is going to happen. And in the reality, as you inferred, the more whatever we focus on, we get,
It
right?
grows. Yeah, we're throwing
Yes.
fertilizer. We're throwing fertilizer on something that we don't want to keep. I
Exactly.
remember I've read a lot of Brene Brown, and I remember reading a story she told about uh, where the phrase the waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. I do know that one very much.
Do you know where it came from?
I do not.
Okay. This is the interesting part because it had nothing to do with bad news. It was referencing in Germany, how people lived in apartments at that
Mhm.
time and not the insulation we have today. So the whole phrase came from you knew when somebody was going to bed because you heard one shoe and you were waiting for the other shoe to drop and you knew when they were going to bed. So
Well, boy,
it's,
that's a completely different meaning than what I think of it as today.
oh yeah,
Because
absolutely. Totally different.
funny. So, I'm hearing like, if I know as a woman in my 50s, 60s, I am going to be challenged there. I'm going to encounter things, and I may do that. I may have to do some of that on my own because of loss of family or loss of my spouse or free divorce or whatever choice it is. But
Yeah.
so if I wanted to prepare myself best for moving through transitions in my life and dealing with the fear that's associated with that, what are some things you would invite me or encourage me to do to prepare for these things that I know will eventually happen?
Cutting to the chase, I don't think you can.
Okay.
To, but so much, I think having a mindset of life is full of change. Transitions are part of life, and change is part of life. It's not going to be easy when it hits. You can prepare to some extent. Or I lost my mom last year or year and a half ago, and then I lost a brother last summer, suddenly, unexpected. And in that whole process, losing my mom was not a real loss. I mean, she was like 92. She was ready to go.
Hmm.
And so I was somewhat prepared for that because it was imminent. She had been in a nursing care facility and I knew it was imminent. She was on the decline. And she talked to me the last time and I said, it's okay to go now, Mom. And my siblings kept hanging around. I'm like, you guys need to leave. Mom wants to go. But with my brother, it was sudden. There was no preparation. He wasn't in the best of health, but it was a fatal accident. Now, in that, I was totally shocked. Everybody in the family, it was a shock. There was no preparation.
Hmm.
The best thing you can do is process it. Let yourself process it to say, okay, take a deep breath. I cried a lot. Of course, he was my older brother and we were close as siblings. However, he just he went so suddenly. I just had to go. He didn't suffer. I knew he didn't suffer, and I knew it was not going to be a quick process for me to walk through and just. I'll never understand what happened, and nobody was there with him. However, having gone through the process of losing my mom, another thought that came to okay, they're together now. They were really close, so they're together. But I couldn't have prepared for that. There was just not a way possible. And But sometimes in other circumstances, like a divorce, you see it coming. Usually you see it coming. Um, Loss of another loved one, you may or may not. Preparation, I think, is a mindset to some extent, but to tell somebody to prepare, there's only so much you can do. When the process started with the failing of the marriage and the divorce, I knew it was imminent only because of the circumstances revealed themselves that I knew it was coming. But for me, I just walked through it. I just kept moving. Just try to keep going, do what you can. If you can sit down and journal, I've journaled for 30 years now. I've got 35 journals sitting here from writing. Just write it out,
Mhm.
scream, let yourself process it however that looks best for you. But sometimes there's going to be a lot of tears, there's going to be anger, frustration, irritation. Let yourself let yourself process. Write it out, talk to someone, but most of all, don't lose sight of yourself. Do your best to not to lose sight of who you are. Like, I can get through this. Um, and there are times, honestly, I didn't think I'd get through anything. If I had known when that started what I was going to go through, I, I couldn't have accepted it at any level. But yet I look back and I see at every turn I didn't intentionally summon up courage. That's what is so
No, but and I'm going to
courageous.
argue with you a little bit about this because I think you have done a lot to prepare. When I listen to your story and when I know who you are, what I see is a woman who is very clear on who she is, and that work can be done before a major crisis comes into your life, rather than trying to do it while the crisis is happening. I see that in you. You know who you are. You're strong in that. And then at the same time, I mean, you said 30 years of journaling. You're very introspective. So you're aware of your emotions and how things get processed. And I mean, both those things, knowing who you are and dealing with your emotions and understanding how you process those, become skills that you apply when you're going through crisis, when suddenly things are thrust upon you that you weren't expecting. So for me, from my perspective, I would really encourage women to do that work up front. Don't wait for the crisis to happen. But then, I mean, it does sound like you you focused on the positive, you allowed the process to happen, you didn't deny it, you didn't try to control it. It took as much time as it took. You let that happen. So I mean, there's some lessons there as well. And you keep moving. We've talked about that a couple times today, and I think that that's really critical. Otherwise, you start to get stuck in a circle of your mind, just going over and over and over, and it becomes a fear that accelerates.
Mhm.
At least that's been my experience. When I look at my own life and I think a lot about the situations I've gone through, in particular, I'm thinking right now about the loss of my husband. I was in no way at that time, I might have thought I was clear about who I was, but I actually had to figure all that out after he had passed away. And when I was trying to re pull all the pieces back together and create a life for myself,
Yeah.
that's when I did the work. And I wish I had done the work in advance in that regard.
100%, I totally agree. And I've always been attuned to writing and that kind of thing. My mother was an English teacher. I was well schooled. She should have written a book, but her life was not there. So I'm writing on her behalf in many ways. And when I started journaling, I was in another crisis many years ago, not so dissimilar. I would encourage people to look at patterns in their lives as well, because but honestly, it took me years to look at patterns. And I went through therapy or counseling, and she helped me look at every situation where I've been married more than once. She looked at every one. She went, okay, we're going to look at why you married this one, that one, the other one,
Mhm.
whatever relationships there were. And I started seeing that pattern. But years later, as in the last few years, I started to see a deeper pattern that it wasn't just a circumstantial, generational father issues, that it's inside me,
Mhm.
that I had created this world that I was living in. And honestly, getting to that point, I it's hard. I'm just going, I do not like this. Okay.
Mhm.
But I'd write this stuff out. And that's something I've learned fairly recently within the year, I think, maybe sometime before that, but definitely recently. Stop repeating. I mean, journaling is good, but I would discourage writing about your problems every day. I would work on gratitude, work on yourself,
Mhm.
and find a way out of that horrible pattern of, and you're right, it's like a friend of mine years ago told me, it's like an LP. Okay, you're all, if everybody in this group is over 50, you know what an album is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you put the needle on the record and it spins and it spins and it spins in grooves. That's what you're doing to your brain.
Uh-huh.
You're just digging grooves and staying in that same pattern. And yes, I was in denial off and on and frequently of, we're looking towards everybody else. I need help with this. I need help with that. And now I have learned, something happens, something comes up, breathe, sit down, and just let the dust settle is one of my favorite things. Let the dust settle,
Mhm.
because if you're in a dust storm, you can't see anything. Let the dust settle and say, okay, what do I need to do about this? If you don't have an answer, you don't have an answer. But it helps to just let the dust settle and let your mind clear. Listen to some music, go for a walk, um, take a nap, watch a movie. Make it positive as much as you can. Those are some of the things, because I've not just been writing. I love music and I'm a big movie buff.
Mhm.
And I enjoy positive, upbeat, true story, things that are encouraging. And I have to encourage your listeners to watch this one movie called The Mystery of Her.
Hmm. Tell,
Just the
tell us
name.
why.
What's that?
Tell us why. The mystery of her.
The Mystery of Her. It's about a teenage girl. I think she was a senior, but she lost her long-term memory in a car accident. I don't want to give the whole plot away, but it's very deep, very, very deep.
Huh.
And and as you listen and watch the movie, she says things to the extent of, I'm just going to start where I am. If I ever gain my memory back, that's great, but I can only be who I am right now. It turned out she was somebody totally different. She wasn't as connected to the things of her that she was supposed to be doing. Everybody wanted to keep her in that. So if you look at it from a perspective of, sometimes it's better to lose your mind and find the real you. It really is a very powerful movie that speaks to letting go of your past. She had no choice. We
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. That sounds like a great film. I definitely am gonna be checking that one out.
Oh,
I,
it's
as
good.
we've been talking, I've been thinking a lot about how, so for example, I feel like because I hike a lot and we go on trails that scare me, sometimes I have to climb over rocks or climb down a ravine or whatever it is that I'm doing physically, it scares me. But I've learned from that that I can handle hard things. And I think as a result, I have developed a stronger courage when it comes to facing things like health issues or the loss of a friend or a crisis in the family that needs to be dealt with and responded to in some way. Do you think that doing little things like the example I gave was hiking, do you think those things help us become more courageous?
Oh, absolutely. I have had a bit of a hip issue due to some injuries that happened some time back
Hmm.
that I've been gradually healing from. And I just recently, I used to have a mini trampoline and I sold it last year. I love doing a mini trampoline. Very good for your health. Very good. But doing anything for the last couple of years has been extremely challenging. And even going for walks, I love to do that. I haven't been able to. Well, I got a nice credit from one of those companies that we buy a lot of stuff from. I turned around and ordered one. I ordered a nice one. I said, okay, if it's only 5 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week, I'm doing it. It
Good.
didn't, it doesn't always feel good, but and my body is, like, don't do this, don't do that. You have to take one baby. If it's just a baby step, I mean, if you don't want to climb a mountain, go walk around your neighborhood. So, but I agree. I think it's important to challenge ourselves, be wise about it, of course,
Hmm.
yet a challenge. And it's here. Everything is in our minds. We create our own world, and I said that before. So create something different. If you don't like where you're at, get create a new life. And I'm reading the greatest little book. You probably heard of Carla Burns, called What Walt Knew, like Walt Disney.
Yeah, I
Oh
haven't
my
heard of this one.
God. Yeah. It is about using the imagination. And I have to tell you, it's amazing. It is. She refers to some current authors and people that you'll recognize in there. But it's about using our imagination. And she's opened my eyes to seeing things different on the some of the films that we watched as, little girls, like the Sleeping Beauty
Uh-huh.
and Cinderella and such. They mean different things than we think. They're deep. There's some deep, deep awareness in there. And I think it's been easy as an adult to lose our imagination. It's trained out of us, beat out of us, whatever. However, it's still there. We just need to tap into it. I make things called mind movies, kind of like a digital vision board
Okay.
that I make, and I put music that's encouraging. So I watch, this is the life I put on there, what I desire. And so I can feel what I want my life to be. And that has helped me. But and until, the last few months, I couldn't feel like things could get any better. I couldn't feel. And yet when you take just even a baby step, you'll start to, okay, that mountain looks impossible, but I can go do this little hike and take a few steps going up a little hill. I can do that. And then you feel, oh, next time it's a bigger hill.
You know,
Okay.
years ago, I did some work around the idea of risk. And what I learned was you can take risks intellectually, you can take risks emotionally, you can take risks physically, and you can take risks spiritually.
Mhm.
And I think the same is true for courage, that you can, if you're feeling like you don't have a lot of courage, you can look at one of those areas of your life and say, where could I get courage? Maybe for some of us it's physical, for some of us it might be intellectual, some of it's spiritual, or some of it emotional. But where could I, looking at those aspects of my life, take a little baby step that would help me begin to feel and to know myself as a courageous woman.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I was on a podcast with somebody, she was interviewing me like you are,
Mhm.
and we were talking about courage. So of course she had to bring up one of my favorite movies, The Wizard of Oz and The Cowardly Lion.
Uh-huh.
Well, I recently watched Wizard of Oz again, and he had it all along. And there is some, I can't quote it, didn't even think about having it handy, but there's some things that I think he said, or somebody said to him, maybe it was the wizard, but it talked about courage, that the badge just made him see it on the outside, but it was already there
On the inside.
on
Yeah.
the inside. And, you know, I think one of the biggest things to learn to do is to love ourselves, not just know who we are, but to love ourselves and be able to accept ourselves. Now, that takes courage too. That takes real courage
Uh,
to embrace, yeah, to embrace
really. Yeah.
liking ourselves. Some people don't even like themselves, let alone love themselves.
It's kind of a sad thing to realize, but yeah, I think we all struggle with loving ourselves, appreciating who we are and what we have to offer and bring into the world to share with others. We always think everyone else has something better. But part of that getting to know who you are is learning to love yourself as well. Um,
Yeah.
Janice, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that you let people help you.
Yeah.
So when you think about courage,
Mhm.
how does having a strong support system help you to find your courage and to build it?
Ooh, being one of the most stubborn people on earth. And I can do it all. You know, the kid in the commercial, I can do it myself, mommy. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That was probably me as a kid. I'm sure she never told me, but I'm sure. I think the summoning up the courage to ask for help, maybe make that first phone call. Let's say you've gone through a tragedy of some sort in your life. You're not able to even breathe hardly. It's just too much. Picking up the phone and talking to someone who is a safe place, someone you can trust that can just sit and listen. And if somebody's watching this that needs to be that for somebody else, let them talk. Let them be there. And sometimes it's just being able to sit with someone in silence and not say a whole lot. Having the courage to pick up the phone or walk to the neighbor or do something to get some assistance, whatever that might look like. And emotional help is really huge,
Mhm.
really, really huge. I I would say for me, I didn't know how to summon up a lot of again, I didn't want to talk about what I was going through. I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want to have people think bad of me. And I never thought of myself as being someone who needed anybody's opinion, but I'm on the road to not being a people pleaser anymore. Pretty much I'm not. But
Mattered then.
yeah, yeah, I it's just if it means picking up the phone and just or it nowadays just texting somebody and saying, I trust you and I need to talk
Mm.
and I need to process. And I would say if you're on the other end of that, don't try to have all the answers. Don't. It's not possible. But being a support system takes courage too. It takes courage for somebody to be there when you have a friend in crisis or in a tough situation. That is a courageous act, just as much as reaching out when you need help.
Absolutely. I think as our culture, we've been taught to be independent and we should be able to handle our own problems and deal with life as it comes at us. And so learning how to actually ask for help and being willing to accept help is part of this process of moving through huge shifts and changes in our lives. And that does take courage. That's another act of courage when you pick up that phone or call. For me, I always think I have a couple of friends and I reach out to them, and I also find great comfort in just being hugged.
Yeah,
You have physical connection with another person and saying, I just need a hug right now. I don't need to talk about everything. I just need a hug right now. Gives me great relief and
mm,
allows me to connect back to myself as well.
absolutely. I recently had a conversation. I might have even been on a podcast with someone but we were talking on the phone later,
Hmm.
and he's done counseling for years and years. We were talking about, and of course, everybody's watching this on, you know, Zoom because we don't live close to each other. However, it is important to remember a phone call is actually a better connection than a Zoom because you're not distracted by the visual image. Sometimes it's good, but really, as he and I were talking, I realized you're right. We have deeper talks when we're not looking at the camera.
Right.
If Yeah, so whatever works, somebody might not be close. I'd say the majority of my closest friends are nowhere nearby. And And by the way, you can just give yourself a hug sometimes. It's
A-
okay.
Absolutely,
Or,
absolutely. But
or your pet.
the physical contact is great, but also I can be hugged by someone's words,
Yeah,
right?
you
We,
can,
in fact, that's another skill to develop is how to encourage and love people when you
yeah,
physically aren't in the same room together, given our world today. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you one more question before we start to wrap up today. For women who are listening who feel stuck in fear right now,
Mm.
what is one piece of advice that you would give them, and where can they go to learn more about building their courage?
One piece of advice, besides everything we've said,
Which is
but
a lot. Yeah.
if you're stuck in fear, spend some time by yourself and ask yourself, what am I afraid of?
Hmm.
Like the cowardly lion. I mean, face it. You know, he summoned the courage to go to the Wizard of Oz. Now they were afraid of the Wizard of Oz, but summon up the courage to just ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What what am I gonna lose my life from whatever I'm afraid of? Am I going to I don't know, pick any scenario, lose friends, lose family. But again, love yourself or just like yourself if that's where you are enough to say, what is so scary? What is why is this fear just eating me alive? And I've had to ask that many, many times. And when you sit down and really ask yourself that, I'd write it down. I'd encourage you just write it down. What am I afraid of? Am I going to go bankrupt? Am I going to go, you know, not be able to walk? Now with the hip issues I've dealt with, same thing. I've thought, oh my gosh, and I stopped thinking that way. But I've gone through those thoughts. What if I wind up in a wheelchair? And I go, wait a minute, where did that come from? And so don't stare at the worst case scenario. Just look at what am I afraid of?
So name
And
your fear. Name your fear.
name your fear because when you face it, it really can disappear. It really can, just stare it in the eye and go, huh, you're not so big and burly after all.
No, and you can, I think then it allows you to start finding ways to deal with it, respond to it, face it, right?
Absolutely.
Versus the man in the closet.
Yeah, I know the monster under the bed and the boogeyman in the closet.
Yep.
And I have a journal that I would highly recommend anyone and everyone to use. I've written blogs for 4 years, thereabouts, maybe longer. And my journal is called Courage, Confidence, and Connections Journal. You take a blog one each day. It's a 90-day journal, so you can read a blog, and then there are questions to help you think and compare, look at it in perspective to your life. It's a very effective journal, and didn't write it for that. I just took 90 blogs off my website and put it in a book to help people.
So we will be sure to include that. I assume that's on Amazon, right?
It is. I like to sign my books. And if people can just go to janicedebo.com, they can learn more about me
Okay.
and it's back there. And you can also order the book in a PDF or in a hard copy. Now, if you order the hard copy, the order comes to me directly and I get to write you a sweet note
Oh,
and sign it. It's fun.
well, I will be sure to include that link as well in the show notes, so people listening, women listening, can find that and get that for themselves, if that, or gift it to friends who are going through times of stress and frustration and need some courage and some support. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
with us about that. Wow. I mean, this has been an incredible conversation. And Janice, I thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom on courage. I know that a lot of women listening today are going to walk away feeling like they're more empowered, they're able to handle and take bold steps in living the lives that they want to create for themselves. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to start building more courage in your life, I encourage you to take one small action this week, whether it's speaking up for yourself, trying something new, or reaching out for support. Remember, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about taking action despite your fear. And if you would like to connect with Janice or learn more about her work, I have included her contact information, including that book resource, in the show notes. So be sure to check that out as well. And everyone, as always, I am grateful and thank you for spending time with me on Unscripted and Unstoppable. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who could use a little extra encouragement right now, a little extra courage. And don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep showing up, keep embracing the journey, and remember, you are unstoppable. And
Thank you.
thank you, Janice, so much. It has been wonderful today.